Good evening and welcome to Gravitas, and a special word of welcome to all our viewers in the UK. WION has now launched in the UK on Sky and you can watch us there. Let's begin. "2020 was about the wait for a vaccine. Now we have some, and countries the world over are inoculating people. But one of the first vaccines to get an approval is now under scrutiny. The Oxford Astrazeneca shot that goes by the name of Covishield in India is under the scanner. At least 15 countries have suspended it. This is after reports said that the shots lead to blood clots. But does evidence back these claims, or are these overblown fears? Investigations have begun as more countries continue to slap suspensions, and this is extremely significant for India. A, because India is inoculating a majority of its population with the same shot, Oxford Astrazeneca Covishield, whatever name you call it by. And B, because India is also leading the global supply of Astrazeneca. So what is India doing about these new safety concerns? Have there been similar adverse reactions in India? And what do experts say about the vaccine? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss. Also on the show, how serious is the problem of racism in the UK? An Indian origin MP raises the issue in Parliament. India's External Affairs Minister says Delhi cannot turn a blind eye to the matter. Scores more killed in Myanmar. Police brutality intensifies as protesters vandalize and burn Chinese factories. We'll get you a special report. Women protest for safety and dignity in countries that are seen as safe. The UK, the US, Australia. The same stories, three different stories rather, in the same message. And Pakistan does not believe in being subtle. It is celebrating its ties with China with a puppet show. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Registering an upward trend for 5 days in a row, India recorded 26,291 new COVID-19 cases on Monday, which is its highest single-day spike in 85 days. India is the third most affected country globally, with over 11.33 million cases. At least 8 people were injured after a pressure cooker bomb exploded at a government office in southeastern Nepal. The Janatantrik Terai Mukti Morcha has claimed responsibility for the blast. The group has been agitating for greater political and economic rights for the people of the Terai Plains. Violent clashes broke out in the Dutch city of Hague on Sunday as police fired water cannons at an anti-curfew demonstration. The protesters flouted social distancing rules, ignored warnings to disperse, and threw fireworks at the police. Meanwhile, the surge in COVID-19 cases in Europe is leading to new restrictions, with Italy preparing for an Easter lockdown. China and North Korea top the agenda as U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrive in Japan. This is their first overseas trip to Asian allies Japan and South Korea. The significant trip comes right after the quadrilateral security dialogue aimed at shoring up an open and free Indo-Pacific. According to the latest report from Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, or SIPRI, for the first time since 2001 to 2005, the volume of deliveries of major arms between countries did not increase between 2011 to 15 and 2016 to 20. The report says the US remains by far the largest arms exporter. A winter storm pounded large parts of western US, forcing the cancellation of hundreds of flights in Denver and shutting down major highways. More than 30,000 households were reported to be without power in Colorado.
For the most Grammy wins ever by any female artist.
Beyoncé has made Grammys history with 4 wins, taking her total Grammy wins to 28. With this, she has overtaken Alison Krauss for the most Grammys awarded to a female artist. Nominations for the 2021 Oscars have been announced. Ramin Bahrani's The White Tiger has bagged a nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, produced by Priyanka Chopra. The film is an adaptation of Aravind Adiga's 2008 novel of the same name. Cristiano Ronaldo has overtaken Brazilian football legend Pelé's tally of goals scored in official matches. The Portuguese forward scored a hat-trick in Juventus' 3-1 victory over Cagliari in the Serie A to take his career total to 770 goals, 3 clear of Pelé. The 80-year-old congratulated Ronaldo on his achievement, and he responded with a glowing tribute to the 3-time World Cup winner, calling him an inspiration to all footballers. Justin Thomas has climbed to number 2 in the golf world rankings after winning the PGA Tour's prestigious Players' Championship. 47-year-old Lee Westwood led by 2 shots heading into the final round, but he saw his charge hit a rough patch with 3 bogeys on the front 9. Thomas came into contention as he picked up 5 shots between holes 9 and 12. The two then dueled right down the stretch before a Westwood bogey on the 17th handed Thomas the advantage. Thomas finished at 14 under for the tournament to claim a 14th PGA Tour win.
Does the Astrazeneca vaccine cause blood clots? We ask this question because in the last 1 week, 16 countries have suspended the shot. AstraZeneca is what we call Covishield in India. In Europe, some people are said to have developed blood clots after taking this vaccine. Then the suspensions began. Denmark was the first to do it. It was followed by Norway and Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Romania, Bulgaria and Thailand. All these countries have placed a temporary suspension on the AstraZeneca vaccine. Then we have countries like Austria, Estonia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Latvia and Italy. These have suspended a specific batch of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Spain has delayed using this vaccine to inoculate people between 55 and 65 years of age. And just before we began this show, we got a flash from Berlin. Germany has now suspended the use of this shot as a quote-unquote precautionary measure. So in one way or the other, at least 16 countries have now suspended the AstraZeneca shot. Here's the question. Is the vaccine unsafe, or are these concerns overblown? Is anyone benefiting from these suspensions? How will they impact our fight against the pandemic? We'll discuss all of this and more tonight. First, let's tell you about the AstraZeneca shot, better known as the AstraZeneca Oxford shot, the same one that is being produced and used in India too. Last week, officials in multiple countries said that they had received reports of life-threatening blood clots. In a few cases, it proved to be fatal, like in Denmark, where 1 person died. So we have multiple countries worried about the prospect of dangerous side effects. What do? They suspend the use of the shot and launch an investigation. Which brings us back to the question, is the vaccine unsafe? What do experts say? Well, they back the AstraZeneca vaccine. Europe's drug regulator believes there is no reason to panic. The European Medicines Agency has emphasized that there is no indication that the shot is causing blood clots. Let me repeat that. There is no proof that these blood clots are being caused by the AstraZeneca vaccine. European regulators say the vaccine's benefits outweigh the risks. The WHO, the World Health Organization, says there is no reason to not use the shot. Nonetheless, an investigation began last week. So far, they've not come up with evidence that proves that the vaccine is unsafe. By Wednesday last week, 5 million people in Europe had got the AstraZeneca shot. Out of these, 30 people experienced what is called thromboembolic events. In simpler words, blood clots. When blood clots in the vessel and blocks the flow. What do the makers of the vaccine say? AstraZeneca has issued a statement. It has reviewed safety data of 17 million people who got the shot in the UK and the European Union, and it found no link between the blood clots and the shot. So no proof yet, but that hardly makes things better for AstraZeneca. This company has been firefighting on many fronts. It has been at the center of political disputes, delivery delays, and now safety concerns. And these developments are extremely significant because they directly concern you, whichever part of the world you're watching us from. These shots are being administered in more than 70 countries. In India, close to 30 million people have got at least one dose of vaccine, 30 million in all. And going by several reports, most of them got Covishield. So where does India stand on these safety concerns? India says it will carry out a deeper review of the AstraZeneca shot. It will not suspend the shot just yet. The vaccine in India is being produced by the Serum Institute. So far, India has reported 234 adverse events after immunization. 71 people have died after getting a shot. But experts say there is no link between the vaccines and the deaths. Let's put these numbers in perspective. Close to 30 million people have got the shot in India. Only 0.02% have experienced an adverse reaction. And 0.00025% have been hospitalized. India has not reported any vaccine-related deaths. And less than 1% who got the shot experienced any adverse event. Let me repeat this. All the data shows the vaccines are safe. India has sent more than 48 million doses of this vaccine to around 70 countries, both as exports and grants. And it plans to do more. AstraZeneca has a pact with the Serum Institute to produce 1 billion doses of the shot. Any concerns about safety now will affect the demand and hamper the fight against the pandemic. They say when in doubt, ask the experts. So what do the experts say? What do the numbers say? Does the AstraZeneca vaccine cause blood clots in everybody or only in those with specific comorbidities? Is there a specific kind of blood clot that is being reported? Also, how many adverse reactions have been reported? Is there a clear indication that they were caused by vaccination? Here's a detailed report which separates the facts from the hype.
More than 70 countries have authorized the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine. 350 million doses have been doled out across the world. 17 million people have been vaccinated in the European Union and UK. And at the center of the scrutiny is a specific batch, 1 million doses, delivered to 17 European Union nations. The European Medicines Agency, or EMA, says a quality defect in the batch is unlikely, but the possibility will be investigated further. Are the numbers alarming? Not yet. The number of blood clot cases in vaccinated people is no higher than that seen in the general population. Let's first understand what kind of blood clots are being reported. There are primarily two types. The first is deep vein thrombosis, or DVT, a condition when a blood clot forms in a vein located deep inside your body. It usually occurs in the thigh or lower leg. Is most commonly seen in people above 50 years of age and can enhance the chances of developing a pulmonary embolism, which is the second type of blood clot being reported. Pulmonary embolism is much more severe and forms in the lungs. It restricts blood flow and decreases oxygen levels, and in most cases it proves to be fatal. As of the 9th of March, at least 15 events of deep vein thrombosis and 22 events of pulmonary embolism had been reported among those vaccinated. The EMA says there is currently no indication that vaccination had caused these conditions. There's not much information on the existence of comorbidities in these patients either, but a few adverse reactions have raised questions and concerns. In Denmark, a woman died shortly after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. She had a low number of blood platelets, but reported several clots and bleeding. These are highly unusual symptoms and rarely occur together. In Norway, 3 health workers reported similar unusual symptoms after receiving the vaccine: bleeding, blood clots, and a low count of blood platelets. What's more concerning is that they're all under the age of 50. In Italy, the situation is much worse. 3 people have died after being vaccinated. A 43-year-old Navy officer died of a heart attack a day after taking the shot. A 50-year-old policeman died due to brain hemorrhage 12 days after inoculation. And a teacher passed away in less than 24 hours. The WHO says these cases are just safety signals that suggests review and vigilance, and there is no indication that the Astrazeneca vaccine should not be used. Not everybody is convinced. At least 10 countries have placed a temporary suspension on the vaccine. More countries may follow suit. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Humans love competition. We love our World Cups, the Olympics, elections. No matter how dire the situation, we find scope for competition and rivalry. And this pandemic has been no different. First was the race to lockdown. Who would curb the virus better? Then it was a stimulus race. Who would write the biggest check? And when the vaccines came, that too became a race. Who would achieve herd immunity first? Take Sputnik 5, for instance. It was registered in August 2020, months before vaccines were approved in the West. And that's how Russia is marketing Sputnik, as the first registered vaccine for the Wuhan virus. Same in the United States. When Donald Trump was president, he doubled up as a cheerleader for vaccine makers. It did not matter what Pfizer or Moderna said. The former US president was making his own deadlines. It was about prestige, about racing ahead of rivals, pandemic or not. Geopolitical competition was very much alive. And pharma companies were more than willing to oblige. Last year, they got government endorsements. A kind of vaccine nationalism was picking up. In the West, Sputnik 5 was widely condemned. It was declared a quack vaccine. But as of today, Sputnik has been approved in Argentina, Belarus, Slovakia, Hungary, Iran, and the UAE. Even the European Union is considering emergency use authorization. How times change. A similar episode played out in India. Covaxin, developed by Bharat Biotech, was granted approval by the government. It was immediately dubbed vaccine nationalism, a case of the Indian government backing an Indian vaccine. Until now, 5.5 million Covaxin doses have been administered. Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself took it. The bottom line is, a vaccine is a vaccine. As long as it keeps the virus at bay, it doesn't matter. It should not matter who manufactures it or which country supports it. But try telling that to China. Beijing has unveiled a new visa policy. It applies to foreigners entering the mainland from Hong Kong. And this is very interesting. Listen to this. If you have taken a China-made vaccine, there will be less paperwork while you go to China. You don't have to take a COVID test or fill out a travel declaration form. A China-made vaccine is basically your ticket into mainland China. A couple of issues here. Backing homegrown vaccines is not a problem, but this is vaccine discrimination. It's like saying China-made jabs are better than Covaxin or Pfizer or Moderna, which is not the case. China is attempting to boost the acceptability of its vaccines. Citizens, especially in Southeast Asia, have business interests in China and they frequently visit the mainland. For them, taking a China-made vaccine might sound appealing. So Beijing is leveraging its position as a travel hub to sell its jabs. China's pharma war extends beyond vaccines, by the way. It is driving up the price of paracetamol in India. Since last year, New Delhi has been pursuing self-sufficiency in the pharma sector. It has been the world's pharmacy. Now, China's response was to drive up the cost of raw materials. A 100% jump since November 2020, right in the middle of a public health emergency. This is how China strikes. Countries may have their own reasons to back vaccines, but why are pharma giants playing along? We are talking about one of the most despised industries in the world. Managing public opinion is not their strong suit. The pandemic was their chance to redeem themselves, but they failed miserably. Pharma companies supplied more than 50% of their doses to just 16% of the world population. 1/6. They chased money and market domination. And don't forget, taxpayers contributed to these vaccines. Remember Operation Warp Speed in America? Pharma companies got more than $10 billion. $10 billion of public money. But the public has no right over these jabs. So let's take a step back and take stock of what's happening. Big Pharma used our money to develop vaccines and then sold those same vaccines back to us at a cost. That's the global pharma industry in a nutshell for you. Another story we've been tracking very closely, what's happening in Myanmar after the coup. It's been 43 days since the military seized power. 38 more people have been killed. The death toll has risen to 138. 138 people killed in 43 days. The protests continue, so does the lockdown. The Myanmar army has declared martial law in 6 key areas of Yangon. The decision has been taken in light of the rising anti-China sentiment. On Sunday, several Chinese-funded factories were vandalized and set on fire. Reports say some Chinese workers were also thrashed. Beijing is now increasingly being seen as the facilitator and supporter of this coup, an accomplice of the military junta, and the single biggest threat to the pro-democracy movement in Myanmar. We have a report to show you, and some of the images could be disturbing, but we are showing them because it is important for the world to see and to know the scale of brutality being inflicted on the people of Myanmar.
This video has been released by the Global Times. It shows Chinese factories in Yangon being set on fire. The report says Chinese nationals were also thrashed during this incident. Beijing has pinned the blame on what it calls anti-China locals provoked by anti-China forces. It has asked the military junta to punish the perpetrators, but made no mention of the brutalities being committed by the security forces.
Myanmar has already sent more police and firefighters to the area to strengthen security at the scene. China will continue to urge the army to take practical measures to stop all violence, investigate and punish the relevant perpetrators in accordance with law, and ensure the safety of the lives and properties of Chinese enterprises and personnel in Myanmar.
Here's what this led to. The military junta has imposed martial law in 6 key areas of Yangon: Lang Thaya, Shwep Yi Thar, North Dagon, North Okalapa, South Dagon, and Dagon Sekan. These are all areas where most of the Chinese factories and offices are located. The imposition of martial law here means that the military now has the full administrative and judicial authority over these areas. And this is how that authority is being imposed, through torture. This video from Yangon shows police officers beating and kicking a female protester. Another injured protester who lay unresponsive on the ground is dragged by police officials across the street. He has been identified as a 17-year-old university student who later succumbed to his injuries. A total of 38 people were killed in police firing on Sunday, the bloodiest day since the crackdown began. Public funerals like these have become a frequent sight in Yangon, as parents of those who died weep uncontrollably. Many in Myanmar have started putting the onus on China for these killings. What happened to Chinese factories in Yangon was just one outcome of this rising anti-China sentiment, a sentiment that's not really unsubstantiated. In January, a month before the coup, China's top diplomat Wang Yi met General Ming Aung-Hlaing. Experts say Myanmar's military could not have gone ahead with a move so grave without the support of China. In February, when the coup took place, China did not criticize Myanmar's generals. It called the coup a mere cabinet reshuffle. This support became more evident when Chinese planes landed in Yangon on the 11th of February. Reports said that the planes brought arms and technicians to help the Myanmar army. And now China is telling the army generals to punish the protesters. The world may not have fully woken up to China's role in the ongoing turmoil, but the people of Myanmar have, and they are fighting back. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It's a special day for WION. We have launched in the UK on Sky. And to all those joining us from the UK tonight, I wish we could greet you with a lighter show. But that would not have been true to the spirit of journalism. At WION, we believe in bias-free reportage. We believe in talking about the reality, no matter how grim it may be. On that note, here's the next story for the evening. Racism. Race-based discrimination. The UK is not alien to it. It has a history of colonizing countries with dark-skinned natives. It has a history of slave trade that was between the 16th and the 19th century. Do you think anything has changed in the last 200 years? The world today is talking about racism in the UK, courtesy a royal and a row. The situation has forced India into considering taking up the matter with London. We start with a quick recap of the last week. On the 7th of March, the CBS aired an interview of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, during the course of which Meghan Markle claimed that she had been subjected to racism not just by the British press, but also the House of Windsor. She said that there were concerns about the colour of a baby's skin. This was last week. Here's something else that happened last week. Reports of an Indian student being cyber-bullied went viral. This is Rashmi Samant, 22 years old. She was the first Indian woman to be elected president of the Oxford University Student Union. Here's what followed her election. Her social media posts from 2017 and 18 were dug up. She was accused of being racist, transphobic, anti-Semitic. The reference was to some photo captions. Samant clarified that she had no malicious intent. She even offered an apology. But the targeting continued, as did the trolling. Then came an ironical twist. Those who accused this girl of being a racist began attacking her religious beliefs and nationality. Samant was finally cyber-bullied into resigning from the position of the president of the Oxford University Student Union. What happened with the British royal is not India's business, and New Delhi understands that. But the cyber-bullying of an Indian student needs to be addressed. New Delhi will now be taking up the issue of racism with the UK. Here's what India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar told the Indian Parliament. As land of Mahatma Gandhi, we can never ever turn our eyes from racism wherever it is, particularly so when it is in a country where we have such a large diaspora. As a friend of the UK, we also have concerns about its reputational impact. This comes after an Indian parliamentarian raised the issue of racism in the UK. Speaking of the Oxford student, he said, and I quote, "Her diversity should have been celebrated, but instead of that, she was cyber-bullied to the point that she had to resign, and even the Hindu religious beliefs of her parents were publicly attacked by a faculty member, and that also went unpunished." If this is the kind of treatment that happens at the highest institute like Oxford, what is the message that goes out to the world? You see, Britain has a history of racism. It spans across institutions. In 1986, Prince Philip reportedly told a group of British students in China, and I'm quoting, "If you stay here much longer, you will be slitty-eyed." Let me show you some numbers. The YMCA's Young and Black report found that 95% of young black people in the UK have heard or witnessed racist language at school. 49% feel racism is the largest hurdle to academic attainment. 50% say teacher perceptions are the biggest barrier to educational success. In 2017, The Guardian said, when Meghan weds Harry, Britain's relationship with race will change forever. Well, nothing of the sort happened. Instead, Meghan Markle herself became a victim of racism, or so she claims. A big royal wedding cannot end racism in the UK, neither can a website. Did you know the government has a dedicated website for the UK's ethnicity facts and figures? This one on your screen. It was established by former Prime Minister Theresa May to tackle, quote-unquote, burning injustice. In 2020, Britain's parliamentarians were presented with this report. I'm going to read out some of the portions for you. Page number 3. Over 60% of black people in the UK do not believe their health is as equally protected by the NHS compared with white people. The death rate from black women in childbirth is 5 times higher than for white women. 85% of black people are not confident that they would be treated the same as a white person by the police. Page number 4. The failings of successive governments to act in response to the successive reports and reviews shows that something is wrong with the architecture which is supposed to protect human rights and promote racial equality. Here's what we think is wrong. Priorities. Instead of correcting institutional wrongs, Britain's parliament is busy debating on the internal affairs of another country. Last week it spent 90 minutes talking about protests in India, talking about Indian laws, Indian farmers, Indian press freedom. In January it was talking about Indian minorities. What about the minorities back home? Going forward, why not spend some time debating welfare reforms for them too? Why not spend some time deliberating on how the UK can put an end to racism? Closer home, Sri Lanka is in a fix. This weekend, Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa spoke to Prime Minister Modi just over a week before a crucial vote at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Colombo wants to avoid a defeat on the world stage and escape global scrutiny on the issue of human rights, especially after its recent decision to ban the burqa and close 1,000 Islamic schools. Here's a report.
Over the weekend, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi received a phone call. On the other side was the Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Press release from New Delhi says, among other things, the two leaders discussed cooperation in multilateral forums. This statement says a lot more, but mention of multilateral forums stands out. Next week, Sri Lanka faces a crucial vote at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. And it's bad news for Colombo. The resolution is backed by Canada and the UK. It says the human rights situation in Sri Lanka is deteriorating. Civilian government functions are being militarized. Institutions like the judiciary are losing their independence. Minorities are being marginalized, and the civil society and media is facing intimidation. When this scathing resolution comes up for a vote in Geneva, Sri Lanka reportedly wants India's support. Will they get it? India can choose to abstain, but Colombo cannot be sure. A statement made by an Indian diplomat in Geneva signals that India is unhappy with Sri Lanka. Last month, India said the UN Human Rights Chief's report on Sri Lanka raises important concerns. There was also a mention of respecting the rights of the Tamil community. India was referring to this report from January, released by the UN Human Rights Chief. It says Sri Lanka is on an alarming path towards the recurrence of grave human rights violations. The report says since taking power, the Sri Lankan president has appointed at least 28 serving of former military and intelligence personnel. They have been given key administrative posts in the government. This includes senior military officials who were implicated by the United Nations in alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity during the civil war that ended close to 12 years ago.
The High Commission also recommends states to consider targeted sanctions, such as travel bans and assets freeze against credibly alleged perpetrators of grave human rights violations.
New Delhi has more reasons to be upset with Colombo. Sri Lanka recently refused to honour a port agreement with Japan and India and went ahead with an energy project with a Chinese company close to the coast of Tamil Nadu. The Rajapaksa government says it has offered an alternative terminal project. With the vote at the UN HRC looming, the Sri Lankan Foreign Secretary said last month in an interview that India cannot abandon us. The Modi government has a choice to listen to that appeal and abstain from the vote. But if it chooses to send a message, Sri Lanka might struggle to defend itself at the UN. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
3 continents, 3 countries, Australia, Britain and the United States. They don't measure themselves on any yardstick because they think they are the yardstick themselves. The pioneers of freedom and equality, an example for the world to follow. But 3 separate incidents have shown them the mirror. We start from the land of freedom and justice. only for men apparently. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been accused of sexual harassment by 8 women. Some of the testimonies are chilling. Former Albany State House reporter Jessica Bakeman writes, and I'm quoting, "I never thought the governor wanted to have sex with me. It wasn't about sex. It was about power. He wanted me to know that I was powerless, that I was small and weak." Cuomo quizzed his aides on their sex life. He wanted them to wear heels to work. He made multiple unwanted advances, all from his position of power. The governor has an explanation for his actions. It's a time-tested one. His intentions, he says, were not malignant.
I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable. It was unintentional, and I truly and deeply apologize for it. I feel awful about it, and frankly, I am embarrassed by it. And that's not easy to say, but that's the truth. But this is what I want you to know, and I want you to know this from me directly. I never touched anyone inappropriately. I never touched anyone inappropriately.
He says he feels embarrassed. He says he's sorry for making people uncomfortable. But guess what? A sorry doesn't cut it. On top of that, he's refusing to step down. Both the senators from New York want him gone. Multiple congressmen and state legislators feel the same, but Cuomo is adamant, especially after he was given a pass by the U.S. president himself.
I think the investigation is underway and we should see where it brings us.
Frankly, Joe Biden couldn't have said much else. The U.S. president has multiple sexual assault allegations against him. The Democrats conveniently forgot these allegations during the election. It held that Biden was running against Donald Trump, a serial offender. 8 accusers, a bipartisan demand for his ouster, yet Andrew Cuomo remains governor. The land of the free has a gender caveat. Across the pond, Britain is a nation in mourning. On the 3rd of March, a 33-year-old woman, Sarah Everard, went missing in London. She was walking back from a friend's place. 7 days later, her body was found in a woodland near Ashford. A London policeman has been arrested in the case. He faces charges of kidnapping and murder. Everard's death was a wake-up call for Britain. Even in the country's busiest city, a woman was not safe walking home at night. 2 institutions failed on the night of the 3rd of March: British society and British law enforcement. On Saturday, a vigil was held for Everard. What unfolded in the next few hours was simply shocking. The Prime Minister says he's concerned about what he saw at the vigil. The London Mayor says it's unacceptable, but British women want to know who has got the solution.
It's been such a overflow of emotions of like pure sadness, heartache, frustration, anger. And when obviously it was a police officer suspected, not charged yet, but it just brought a sense of like, who can we trust as a woman? Like, you think that you can trust the police to protect you and always stand up for you, but it's just apparent that, you know, you can't. It felt very isolating and alone.
A policeman accused of murdering a woman, a harsh crackdown at the victim's vigil, and a police department that stands by its heavy-handed tactics. The British bobbies stand exposed. Meanwhile, Australian women are marching on the streets. 40 cities, tens of thousands of protesters. Some are calling it Australia's biggest uprising of women. They are protesting the rising number of assault cases in the country, many of them centred around the parliament. The government's response has been inadequate. At first, Prime Minister Morrison flat out refused to meet the protesters. But seeing the wave of public anger, he invited a delegation into Parliament House. This time, it was the protesters' turn to reject.
It is good and right, Mr Speaker, that so many are able to gather here in this way, whether in our capital or elsewhere, and to do so peacefully to express their concerns and their very genuine and real frustrations. This is a vibrant liberal democracy, Mr Speaker. Not far from here, such marches, even now, are being met with bullets, but not here in this country, Mr Speaker.
what the Prime Minister said is emblematic of the problem. Not shooting protesters is not something you boast about. Remember, we're talking about democracies here. Equality and safety of women cannot be relative until everywhere is safe. Nowhere is truly safe for women. This story is one of a kind. We've heard about military drills on land, on high seas and in the air. But this one is about military drills in space. Recently, France launched its first ever military exercise in space. What does that even mean? What is France preparing to fight in space? Is it the only country gearing up its forces in space? Our next report has the answers.
These are members of the French military. They are in the middle of an exercise codenamed Aster-X, the first ever French military exercise in space. Sitting inside the French Space Command operations room, these servicemen conducted 18 simulated events. A promotional video shows China, Iran, Russia, North Korea and the United States listed as allies and adversaries of France. The French say space is being militarized and they need to prepare. The threat is real. By 2019, more than 2,000 satellites were floating above the Earth, and almost everyone in the modern world depends on them. Satellites help us communicate through our smartphones. They are needed for emergency response during natural disasters. And now, even militaries depend on satellites for intelligence gathering, navigation, and military communications. Any attack on a satellite could have catastrophic consequences. It could cut off communications of an entire nation and blind its military. The idea of bringing down satellites is no longer a figment of imagination. It has been around since the Cold War. Today, major countries have a space weapon of their own. In 2007, China tested a space weapon that destroyed one of its own satellites. The strike left behind a lot of debris. It kept floating in space and posed a serious threat to other satellites. Russia and India too have anti-satellite weapons. In the past, they have shot down their own satellites in a show of force. The United States tested an anti-satellite missile attack in 1985. Under Donald Trump, America took its bid for space dominance a step further by creating a Space Force, a dedicated branch of the US Armed Forces. Last year, the Space Force deployed its first troops, not in space, but to an airbase in Qatar, where they will assist in combat operations that depend on space systems. A study has now advocated that the US should build more space weapons, as more countries are now investing in technologies like missiles, jammers, lasers, and cyber attack systems to take down satellites. This warning applies to every country in the world which has a satellite in space. And now, with the private sector launching space missions and satellites, protecting space assets may now be vital to a country's national security. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
Reality beats satire in Pakistan. Why do I say this? Because Islamabad is going to celebrate the 70th anniversary of its diplomatic relations with Beijing with a puppet show. Here's what the scene is. The 21st of March marks the World Puppetry Day. It also marks 70 years of diplomatic relations between China and Pakistan. It's a big deal for them, they say. It calls for a celebration, and China thought, what better way to celebrate than hold a puppet show? And a puppet show there will be. It will take place at the China Puppet Art Theatre in Beijing. And we're told this will be a joint initiative with the Rafi Pir Art Theatre of Pakistan. The show will celebrate civilizational and cultural heritage of both the countries through puppets. What will the show look like? Well, we can tell you what it's worth. $17.1 billion. That's how much Islamabad owes China, thanks to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Or maybe it's worth $2 billion. That's how much Pakistan received from China in FDI last year. It could also be worth 100 JF-17 hand-me-down fighter jets provided to Islamabad by Beijing, or 4 $350 million warships. that are being built for the Pakistani Navy by the Chinese, or perhaps 40,000 jobs created for Pakistanis through CPEC till date. Although most of these jobs lie vacant, these vacancies have not been filled. The actual worth of this puppet show can also be estimated based on Pakistan's silence on the persecution of Uyghurs in Xinjiang in China, its support for the dictatorial Hong Kong national security law, the several intelligence sharing deals between the PLA and the Pakistan Army, or the conspicuous support that these two countries provide each other for their respective nefarious policies at global platforms. All I'm saying is that the fact that China is holding a puppet show with Pakistan is funnier than anything satirists could ever come up with. It leaves little to imagination on what sort of ties these two countries share. One pulls the strings through financial support, the other willfully complies with diplomatic silence. They don't need a puppet show to prove who's in control. Meanwhile, Beijing has been hit by the decade's worst sandstorm. More than 400 flights have been cancelled. People have reportedly gone missing. Some say it looks like the end of the world. The sandstorm has come with a lesson for China. Here's a report.
It looks like the end of the world.
It feels a bit like a science fiction movie.
Some of my friends who smoke said they felt uncomfortable in the throat.
In literature, a sandstorm is often a sign of foul play. Does this hold true in real life too? This is Beijing, enveloped in a thick brown dust on the Ides of March. Heavy winds have blown in massive amounts of sand. At least 400 flights have been cancelled. Skyscrapers have disappeared. People have reportedly gone missing. Visibility has dropped and readings of PM 2.5 have risen. And as you can see, the masks are back.
In the face of nature, human beings truly are tiny and powerless, so we need to do what we can to protect the environment.
It is being called the biggest sandstorm of the decade. Is there any foul play involved? Sandstorms are a regular feature in Beijing, especially in the months of March and April. Strong winds often blow in sands from the nearby Gobi Desert.
It's kind of yellow, and all the weather is full of very tiny sand. All the building, everything turns yellow and dark yellow, and it's really shocks everybody in Beijing, not only me.
But it's not always this yellow. Experts blame it on deforestation and soil erosion. China has put immense pressure on the environment. It is expanding cities and industries as the Communist Party chases its dreams of dominance. Reports say China has been trying to reforest and restore the country's ecology, but clearly none of that has worked. The worst sandstorm of the decade has now spread to at least 11 Chinese provinces. Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Heilongjiang, Jilin, Liaoning, Gansu, Ningxia, Shaanxi, Shaanxi-Hebei, and Tianjin.
Together with the pandemic, that another big lesson we should take, and we should change our behavior, that really in the thunderstorm.
This tempest comes with a message for China. Is Xi Jinping listening? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.